AI actually is capable of performing what looks more like the work that humans do. So this leads to a critical insight. AI is moving from tool to worker. And instead of helping humans with tasks, software is starting to do the job itself.
Welcome to Technoventure. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Sandhya Venkatachalam. Sandhya is a co-founder and general partner of Axiom Partners, an AI-focused venture capital firm that she launched in May of 2024 to back founders building what she calls AI for the real world, as well as insanely useful and usable products. Axiom reflects Sandhya's longstanding conviction that the most important AI companies will be those that translate breakthrough technology into practical, usable products at global scale. She's a past partner at both Khosla Ventures and at Social Capital, and she previously founded two other venture firms. Before becoming an investor, Sandhya led the development of early machine learning products at Skype, and she was also a corporate development leader at Cisco. Sandhya, welcome to Technoventure. It's great to speak with you today.
Thank you so much, Peter. I really appreciate you having me on today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I've been looking forward to our conversation. Why don't we begin, if you don't mind, Sandhya, with Axiom Partners? I mentioned you founded the company roughly 2 years ago. You did so after a fuller blossoming of this phase of the AI age, and it seems to have impacted how you've thought about the development of your firm. For instance, you're the sole general partner of your firm, and you incorporate AI agents to oversee processes that are overseen by people at traditional VC firms, ones like the ones you've been a part of in the past. Talk a bit about that among other ways in which you've thought about the venture capital firm for the AI age.
Absolutely. So we founded Axiom about a year ago. As you mentioned, we're a new C-stage venture firm that brings together the best AI operators in market today to invest in founders using AI to change the world tomorrow. And this philosophy is directly tied into what you just mentioned. The reason we have AI operators, not folks that have been retired from industry for a long time, is our philosophy is everybody, ourselves and our founders, need to be constantly building and experimenting with AI to always understand what's the latest and greatest, to keep up, and to build the most insanely useful and usable products for customers. So we're doing this ourselves at Axiom. We're building a new type of venture firm for this AI native era. And it's not just to cut a bunch of costs that we have a bunch of agents, but really to make sure that we operate with the speed, agility, and customer orientation, both for our LPs and our founders, that we expect them to be providing their founders. So, for instance, we have essentially automated our entire back office. That seems pretty obvious. I think a lot of people could potentially do things like that. All of our financial reporting, our other types of communications, LP updates, etc. But I think more interestingly, we have built agents for, as you mentioned, specific types of functions. So we have an internal AI lawyer that helps me get all of the documents and legal issues and diligence done with the same accuracy, but in a fraction of the time and at my pace, which is usually overnight, to get term sheets and safes to my founders, in a very timely way and complete diligence and such. We have this sort of a cross sourcing, value creation, diligence. Some of these agents are more advanced than others, but yes, this is the idea. So we know exactly the challenges our founders face because we're trying to incorporate AI to build alongside them.
Fascinating, Sandhya. And I wonder, as you think about the employing and partnering with agents, how do you think about that in relation to past colleagues you've had? Like, for example, just as a colleague might be doing something well or not, that you might promote them or demote them or fire them, as the case may be. You oversee the work that they're doing. Surely, when the agents are first put in place, there's some course correction and back and forth that's necessary in order to make sure that they're optimized. Can you talk a bit about the way in which you've thought about it, given the criticality of what you're describing as to the processes that they're overseeing?
Overseeing is exactly the right word to hone in on. So right now, I have to oversee, and we have a full-time operating partner as well, who oversees all of this. I don't think that we, and really the technology itself, is at a point of self-overseeing and complete trust. A lot of these started as experiments, and the ones that worked well, we tried to encode in more formal ways. So right now, I still think of them as experiments. We do a lot of human checking and oversight. I still don't send out those legal documents without like a really quick review just to make sure everything is in place. I'm able to do that, right? Because I have the experience of those legal docs for venture deals. So areas that we may not have as much familiarity going forward, we will go in a slower fashion. But yes, today there's a lot of human oversight. And it's amazing, though, how much time we can save even today and how we can have those more agile processes and work at the speed of founders, even though the technology is pretty early today and we're still learning how to build it. But yes, human oversight today is necessary.
Fascinating. You've mentioned a couple times now your operating partners, and I wonder if you can share a bit more about their background. You mentioned that part of what makes it compelling, the model that you've established of collaborating primarily with operating partners, is the practicality of the fact that they're still immersed in business. They are operators themselves, and therefore they're not retired executives who perhaps some have become stale in terms of what they know around the topics that in which you're investing in. Talk a bit about the makeup of those operating partners, if you would.
We have three buckets of operating partners. So on the technical side, we have folks at Google, at OpenAI, and former Google, former OpenAI, who have trained or did train the current models that all of our founders are using. And so when our founders uh, face difficulty trying to build something super innovative, or they don't know which model to use, or they also need to push the cutting edge, we have people that can advise them right away. We have a second bucket of operating partners that are founders themselves. And these founders are from companies like Runway ML, from Replit, from Fireflies. These are companies that have raised Series A, B, C, today at valuations that are in the billions of dollars potentially. And so they're a couple of years ahead of where our founders are. And that seems to be the best distance, in a sense, for being able to advise, because they're still working with current technology, current productization issues, customers who are demanding, AI products. But they've solved some of the challenges, right? So they can give great advice to our founders. And then the third bucket is on the go-to-market side. So as much as I love all this great new technology, as we've seen, technology in the past, it's really the ability to reach and satisfy customers at scale that makes fantastic companies. So we have the CMO of HubSpot, who spends time with each and every one of our portfolio companies to help them think about, who is the ICP for some of these new products? How should we price it differently? Are there new ways to go to market in this AI era? And we think this is a relatively unique offering, especially at the pre-seed and seed, to really partner with founders where they're at and when they need help.
You noted, as I noted in the introduction, that you look for insanely useful and usable products. I wonder what constitutes when do you know that what you're hearing about is insanely useful and usable, at least potentially?
This has been my soapbox for the 20 years I've been in Silicon Valley. So while I'm relatively technical now, I came to Silicon Valley from business school, and I never learned to code, and I still don't know how to code. And I use that as a badge of honor versus a chip on my shoulder. So I still represent in many ways the real world. I am extremely demanding of usability in every product. And I am very open with my founders when I don't believe they're spending enough time on that or their products haven't quite achieved that. So they know if they partner with Axiom that that is where I'm going to spend the most time. We have a full-time operating partner that focuses just on productization, usability. He's built amazing products in this AI era. And you might get a little sick of hearing that from us, or at least my founders will. So if you want to build those types of things, right? So why is it important? Because technology, for the last 20 years has essentially been limited to the 80 million elite in the world. I mean, I find many pieces of software very hard to use or access. We want to we want AI to be the enabler of these insanely useful and usable products for 8 billion people around the world. Everybody should be able to take advantage of not just technology, but the skills, the data, and all the advantages that we have both in our sort of consumer lives, personal lives, as well as in our work lives. So this is the angle that we really focus on in Axiom.
Which also feeds nicely to the insight you have of investing in artificial intelligence for the real world, another qualifier that you put to things. I wonder if you can share a bit more about that. Surely that's if you're doing it for the real world, then perhaps you have the opportunity to serve 8 billion as opposed to 80 million. But talk a bit about what that means and to what extent that there may be a suggestion that most VCs are somehow not investing in companies for the real world.
It's probably like the only good marketing slogan I've ever come up with because it really wasn't around marketing. I was really frustrated after meeting slews and slews of really amazing, intelligent founders who were focused in all the same areas around coding assistance or search in areas that have gotten really crowded. And I said, man, I just want AI for the real world. And I said, okay, let's think about what does that actually mean? So I think for us, it means being able to look beyond what's obvious today. There are investors that look at investing in underlying foundation models, right? The large language models themselves or the tooling and data around that. There are folks that are starting to look at what they call the AI application layer, which for most people represents the evolution of the $750 billion B2B software market. So the evolution of sales tech and marketing tech and HR and cybersecurity. And again, I think there will be companies in this new AI era, large companies formed in all of these areas, right? But most new transformational companies rarely emerge from existing categories. And we not only want to find the new category creators, we really do believe that people who are building with AI today can service 8 billion people around the globe. So we actually just try to look in areas where AI is sort of not necessarily stellar today, but performs relatively complex workflows end to end without too much supervision. This is what we're experimenting on even internally at Axiom. And we have realized that rather than just being the software that people use, this $750 billion B2B software TAM, AI actually is capable of performing what looks more like the work that humans do. And so this leads to a critical insight. AI is moving from tool to worker. And instead of helping humans with tasks, software is starting to do the job itself. So if you take this labor view, and even if you prioritize what we call the capacity crunch, right, areas where there's actually a shortage of highly skilled labor, so we're not taking jobs away from anyone, but we're actually trying to fulfill urgent demand for labor that customers in many industries, financial services, accounting, legal, construction, then you start to uncover not just trillions of dollars of potential TAM, but you start really penetrating the real world, all of these areas that affect these 8 billion people. Does that make sense?
It does. No, it's a great articulation. Thank you, Sandhya. You will also, in our past conversations, have mentioned that you use a first principles approach as you think about the technology that you and the entrepreneurs, of course, behind it that you're investing in. Talk a bit about what you mean by that.
Yeah, so we're really lucky to have this team of operating partners that think about AI from the technical perspective, the productization perspective, et cetera. And so we're always trying to figure out how things work. So, what is AI actually capable of today? Not just, what are we seeing in the market or, reading at conferences, et cetera. And what does that tell us about what it will be good at in 1 to 3 years? And I think this is where the deep experience really comes through. So if you've been learning about AI for 1 or 2 years, it's actually hard to have the intuition to project out, right? Because knowledge compounds. And so the fact that I've been investing in AI seed companies since 2017, and my team has been building for, cumulatively 50 years, we actually can try to identify the reality of today and project. So what is AI good at today, right? It's very strong at system one tasks, recall, mimicry, et cetera. It's starting to improve at system two tasks, reasoning, planning, acting, gaining the ability to perform multi-step autonomous workflows. It is encompassing more than just language, and it's not just multimodal language, video, et cetera, but starting to encroach and understand the physical world, right? So we take all of this into account to try to project out. So we are very active in covering active research areas and saying, what are the implications of what types of products can we now build, right? What are the labor fulfillment outcomes that we can now build because of the progression of technology?
It's interesting, just as you've created a VC for the AI age, I know you're attracted to companies that are creating new companies and industries rethought for the AI age as well. You started to talk about some of the industries that have been attractive: construction, legal, accounting. You've mentioned to me insurance, healthcare. Could you provide a little bit of a perspective on some of those that are being rethought and the extent to which you can share some of the kinds of entrepreneurs you're investing in those spaces?
Absolutely. So, if we're not looking at sort of the $750 million or $1 trillion, excuse me, B2B software TAM, I think there are other folks that notice that that accountants are starting to buy more software, lawyers, doctors, teachers. But often, uh, a lot of folks are servicing this by more software, right? So how can we do some automation to improve the lives of those users? And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But if we really believe that AI can build outcomes that look more like the labor itself, then we're looking for companies that are doing exactly that. So I'll give you a few examples. We invested in Julius AI, which is building an AI data scientist. So Julius is not building automation workflows for data scientists. They're building a data scientist, meaning if I'm looking to hire a data scientist and I'm not one of the lucky few people that live in New York or San Francisco or London who can also afford the $500,000 a year, right, for a really good data scientist, I'm out of luck. There's only 3 million data scientists roughly in the world. But we believe that the underlying demand or the latent demand for data science capabilities could be on the order of a couple 100 million data scientists. There will never be a couple 100 million data scientists. So having systems that do that work with over time, less and less oversight, is extremely valuable and it creates new TAM. It also democratizes access to things like data science. You could think about how it could democratize access to the best doctors in the world, the best learning systems, right? So this idea of enabling 8 billion people around the world to start to do things or have access to skills that really give them superpowers. And for us in particular, we're looking for uh, areas where there are really high ASPs. So customers are willing to actually pay a lot because it's tied to real economic impact, right? Versus cost savings. And we ideally would like things to be, more complex and defensible. So you can think of data science. We have another portfolio company that's building an AI network engineer. So nobody under the age of 35 likely is studying network engineering anymore, right? Everybody wants to do machine learning and other sorts of things. But the demand for network engineering is skyrocketing with the demand for data center compute, serving capacity, et cetera. And 80% of network operation centers are actually people, not software. And the people who hire those people pay them hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so this is what this portfolio company is selling. They're selling network engineers, and they're able to command ASPs in the couple $100,000 range because it's coming from a labor budget, not a software budget. Is that helpful?
It's very helpful. Yeah. And I wonder, do you have a sense for the kinds of companies that are likely to be the early adopters of this? What you're describing certainly makes sense as you describe it. It's also, of course, a major difference in terms of how people think about managing a workforce, in this case, both humans and digital workers alike. What do you see as some of the commonalities among those organizations that are likely to put their hands up first to operate in the way you're describing?
It has surprised us. So I would have assumed that the traditional buyers of software, a lot of technology companies themselves, right? There's often talk about how many startups sell to other tech startups or tech companies. And that's fine because those are folks that have leaned into cutting edge software in the past. But we've actually been really surprised. So in this example of the AI network engineer, it's actually a state library system that was their first customer. And I at first was like, why do these people need data centers or network operation centers? And then I thought about the enormous amount of data that libraries have to manage and provision. And it's not just a state thing, it's a national thing and perhaps a global. And what was interesting to me is how much budget they actually had. So they probably had very little budget for software, right? They could probably spend $20,000 on, something a year, but they had job postings for network engineers. And so they're willing to pay for that. So we've been surprised at the types of customers. I mentioned that the construction space. So we have a portfolio company that is trying to disintermediate the $2 trillion market for construction building materials. This is not a space I have spent any time in my 20 years in Silicon Valley. And I doubt that most VCs in Silicon Valley or in New York have done so either. And the customers there range from the factories that are building tiles and windows and flooring to the general contractors, right, that need those materials, owner developers, customers I had never actually named myself, right, until I started learning about this industry and doing diligence. And so this really is, we can't get any more real world than building buildings and bridges and roads and hotels. And some of these industries, almost skipped the digital era. There's software, but it's relatively antiquated. And most of the data is not digitized. It's unstructured data. this is what AI is really good at. And so rather than being scared of industries like this, if we understand what AI is capable of, we say, actually, this is the best time to go and structure all that unstructured data in the construction industry and do something with it. So we're willing to take that risk, and we're able to do so, at the very earliest stages.
Very interesting. As you seek founders who have a different view of what tomorrow might look like, I wonder, what do you look for in their backgrounds to ensure they have the credibility to reach the goals they're articulating? These are, not just sort of like a new version of something that exists, but in many cases, dreaming up a new way of operating, as you so well articulated throughout this conversation. Is there, especially with this lens in mind, different in this firm of yours than past VC firms, for example? Is there anything different you're looking for in those founders to ensure that they have the chops to be able to deliver?
The vision itself is the place we start. So, we know a lot about the potential of AI and how it can be applied, but really the founders drive that knowledge and that vision. If I meet a founder that's not thinking as big as I'm even thinking about some of these new areas, then it's sort of a way to evaluate that founder. So even though we say we're thesis driven, the theses are actually ways to really evaluate how the founder is thinking. And often the really great ones teach us, right? Well, when I walk away saying, wow, I had never thought about that before. Is that crazy or is it something that's doable? So then I go and try to figure that out by talking to customers and thinking about it and talking to the team. But it starts with that vision. Um, you then need to demonstrate the credibility to do similar things to what I've looked for in the past, to hire well, right? To raise money, to build a company, to really have a credible plan of how do we get from here to this big, ambitious, sometimes crazy vision. And there are very few people in the world that actually possess both that ability to think, like the crazy ones, as Steve Jobs said, but then say, okay, I have this really tactical plan and I'm going to operate against it. And this is why I have the utmost respect for, founders, whether I back them or not, they really need to possess this. But they don't need to possess every great quality. This is where, hiring around you, and complementing yourself with a really great team is important. And at Axiom, we actually help with that. So founders need to be self-aware about what they're exceptionally good at and where they actually need help. So we don't concentrate on buffering up the weaknesses. We hire for that, right? Let's get a great operational person or a go-to-market person, or some area that is complementary. And if the founder is open to that or has already been thinking about that, that's a really great sign. If they're a bit recalcitrant about hiring to complement themselves, it's just a flag, right, that we need to consider and discuss. So I think many things are similar to what I've looked for in the past. But I think today, many folks in venture, are looking for just a credible vision or credible plan of how do I get to 100 million in revenue as quickly as possible. And we worry less about the details of that, but how do we get to a company that has 10 billion of revenue someday, right? Is there even a possibility of that? So that's definitely the starting point.
Hmm. Very interesting. As you are referencing the importance of building great teams around the founders, I wonder, as you think about the evolution of your firm, is there a point at which you would consider bringing on other GPs? Is it simply a question of when you've stretched your time so significantly that additional resources will be necessary? How do you think about that as you look to the future?
Absolutely. So today I try to take my own advice, that I give to founders and say, what are the areas that I need help with that could complement my skill set? So instead of starting with a co-GP that might have a background similar to myself, I opted for a model where we have the ability to scale technical folks, founders, go-to-market experts, right, and really have them as part of the core team. But as we flex in those ways and scale that, it's of course wonderful to have other GPs, other investors that are really focused on the same things. And so, we're very excited that we just announced the close of our first fund in a very difficult fundraising environment. We had a oversubscription, and we're able to get that done. Fund two will hopefully be bigger, and fund three and so forth. And so we'll have the capacity to have other GPs, and I think that becomes even more important in this thesis of AI for the real world. So I have lots of background and the ability to diligence a few areas, but AI is affecting so many different areas: education, health, and medicine. And I think having GPs with that sector expertise could be, again, really complementary. So very open to meeting people, getting to know folks that have similar ideas, culture, visions for how they want to build a firm, and that complementary sector expertise.
Understandably, we talked a lot about artificial intelligence, its sanctity, its continued progress, and the implications of that in a firm like yours. I wonder, are there adjacent spaces? Are there other trends on the rise that you're aware of and curious about, and whether investing in or simply making sure that you remain abreast of progress in those areas for their impact on AI and the kinds of companies you're investing in, or just more generally speaking?
Yeah, AI has become sort of this catch-all phrase for anything where there's some kind of language model that has some probabilistic outcomes that then affect some industry. So I actually don't consider ourselves often an AI firm. I think of us as like a future of software firm. So wherever there is the possibility of new technology impacting industries around the world, we want to be at the forefront of that. And that's where the operating partner model can be really agile. So we can recruit more people with different technology expertise, different sector expertise as these things change. Today, what we're really interested in is, from a pure technology perspective, is the evolution of really language models to other types of models that are representing different areas. So we're looking at companies that are modeling the physical world, so physics itself. We are looking at companies that are modeling fluid dynamics and different states of energy, companies that are modeling biology. These may or may not look like AI that's coming from large language models or language-based or video-based models. They might have very different implications, capital requirements, different types of applications in different industries. And so we're keeping a really close eye on those because we think those could help lead us to the next technology breakthroughs and therefore, applications and products that we should be investing in. So we're always trying to be acutely aware of what's next. We actually run a dinner series alongside our founder dinner series. We have a research dinner series where 3 or 4 researchers, not necessarily just in AI, come and present their work. These are usually PhD students or folks that are in the research departments of some of the larger technology companies. And, they're open to anyone. And, worst case, we just sit and learn and spark ideas. But the conversations that happen between founders and researchers in the same room behind closed doors, in a sense, where like nobody's recording anything, are quite interesting and help trigger ideas for us as well about where to focus. So yeah, there's a lot out there.
No lack of opportunity. I want to, a
No lack of
related
opportunity.
topic here. I wanted to ask you a bit more about how you stay informed. You mentioned a short while ago the advantage you have of having great founders to learn from. They teach you about the things that they're deeply expert in. So clearly, that is one of the resources you're tapping day in and day out. But I wonder beyond that, what resources you leverage, whether it's things you read, things you listen to. What would you recommend, or what do you appreciate that helps keep you informed to look around corners?
Yeah, at the risk of being repetitive, it's really this network of people that are in it today, right? So whether it's our operating partners that, again, like half their lives or more they're spending in their day jobs, right? And bringing that knowledge of what's actually happening at OpenAI today or in some of these startups that are more advanced or in a company like HubSpot, right? A large publicly traded software company that is both trying to use AI internally as well as sell AI to its customers. These are all really rich perspectives that give us context for the new things that we're sort of looking at. We do keep on top of as much research as we possibly can. Some of it is highly relevant, some of it's just mildly interesting. And we've tried to formalize that, not just for ourselves, but to have open discussions, right, with the community, to have dialogue about what does that actually mean for your startup, if anything, right? And kind of keeping up to date with that. So it's interesting. I don't do a lot of reading in the traditional sense, besides like some research papers and stuff like that, because by the time somebody writes something that's deep and interesting, it's already probably been, 2 to 6 months since the interesting thing happened. I feel like talking to people, in the industry who are just building all day long, and talking to researchers who are, developing the latest and greatest is much more useful. And this is why we're very lucky to, be based in a place like the Bay Area, right? Like Silicon Valley, where I literally walk out the door to get a coffee and I can't help but run into somebody at my local coffee shop that's building something interesting, whether it's relevant to Axiom or not. So this is the beauty of community, and why it's such an exciting time and place to be building.
Well, Sandhya, thank you so much for a fantastic conversation. It's so interesting to hear more about the way in which you've thought about designing your firm emblematic of where business is going as opposed to where it's been, where the venture industry is going as opposed to where it's been, and likewise how you are investing in the future as well. It's been wonderful to learn from you. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. I really appreciate the insightful questions and like the desire to know more, and not just the superficial. So it was a real pleasure.